Hello, this is Kings of the Ice, a new podcast about figure skating where we discuss the sport violating some English grammar rules on the way. And I think I already said this joke before, but what's better than a joke that has been said twice? Probably everything, but since the topic we are going to be discussing today is very, very serious and not funny at all, I think we need to use as many jokes as we have at the beginning, because later on we are going to be discussing something that is really sad. And I have to say that I would be proud that figure skating is, all over the media, even all over the Polish ones, while figure skating, as we know, is not a very popular thing to be discussed in media. So I would be even proud of it, if not the reason why it is present in media in the first place. And probably you already know, we are gonna be discussing the verdict on Kamila Valieva's doping case that was announced a few days ago. And I'll share some thoughts I have on the topic, including, did Kamila Valieva know about the doping herself? Did she take it intentionally? Will she continue her career / be allowed to do so? And why public declarations of her innocence made, for example, by Evgenia Medvedeva are in fact harmful to Kamila? But first, let's jump back to where it all started, and I will briefly describe the whole case for those of you who are new to the sport and maybe try to make something out of this whole mess. So, Kamila Valieva was 15 years old at the Beijing Olympics, and at that time she had just led the Russian team to victory in the team event above the United States and Japan teams to win silver and bronze respectively. The day after the competition, it was found that Kamila tested positive for the banned performance-enhancing drug called trimetazidine, found in a sample taken at the Russian nationals a month and a half prior. Because it all had come to light just before individual competition, there was a discussion whether to allow her to compete or not, with votes, both for against, mostly among fans, and even with a hashtag send her home. Eventually, she was allowed to skate by CAS panel, Court of Arbitration for Sport, as a, quote, protected person, because just to remind you, she was only 15 years old at that time. But she placed 4th overall with a heartbreaking error-filled free skate. Then we had a controversial RUSADA verdict, Russian anti-doping agency, stating that, quote, again, Kamila bore no fault nor negligence for a positive drug test, letting her skate in a domestic competition, because as you know, Russia is banned from international ones as a result of the war they started. And Kamila is still welcomed in shows and competition in Russia as a hero and perceived as an innocent victim. Then in March 2023, it was announced that CAS was in a process of selecting a panel which would decide upon either allowing or suspending Kamila from further competition, including the next Olympic Games. And here we have the result of this investigation, as the Court of Arbitration for Sport released its decision stating Kamila's guilt, or precisely her inability to prove she hadn't taken the banned substance intentionally, like she wasn't able to prove it, and therefore is banned for 4 years starting from December 21, when the sample was taken, and that her results from that moment are cancelled. For many, it was a shock, I think. Not the result itself, but how harsh the ban was. Like, some expected, when I, was listening to some podcasts or some discussions, and some expected it to be even like few months ban or so, but not 4 years. Everybody has their opinions on that. So here are some of mine. First, and the most important, I think, did Kamila Valieva know that she had been taking a banned drug? In my opinion, no. And I'm talking not only about her visible shock after it was found out, because let's be honest, you can take a drug and still be in shock just because it came to light, right? Also, I'm not talking about the factor everybody's considering, meaning that a 15 years old doesn't probably even know what trimetazine is, let alone take it on her own. I mean, I agree with that, but the main reason I think she was actually drugged by the adults, probably her coaching staff, without knowing it, is that Russian figure skaters are gathered away from their family and friends to the point that sometimes they even live with their coaches, see Alina Gorbacheva's case. And you may think it's because they have a very strict training regime and it's just easier to have a constant access to all the training facilities, and it's also easier for coaches to kind of have an eye on them, however strict it still is. But you would be right. But I have a theory that they also are taken away from their families to be treated by specific doctors in a specific way, so to speak. So that brings me to the conclusion that they're taken away because the coaching staffs and the doctors don't want the parents to know. I mean, I know very well that there are many toxic parents in figure skating. You know that saying that I heard that some time ago and I really like it. And I'm telling you, I never remember any of the sayings or quotes or anything like that without, writing them on a journal or something. But this one, I really remember it. I really do. And the saying is, figure skating is not the skater's sport. It's the parents' sport, right? Because it's obvious, because this is one of the sports that you really have to get the kid as soon as possible. I mean, in all of the sports, the younger you are, the better, but in figure skating especially. So I know very well that there are many, many toxic parents among figure skaters that kind of force them to do that. For example, Aliona Kostornaya once shared that she hated figure skating as a kid, that it was actually her mother to force her to do that. And Aliona started to like it only when the results came, only when she started to win. So I know very well that there are some harsh parents, strict parents, even to the point that they have their kids training it, not wanting it in the first place. But on the other hand, I really believe that there are some great parents among the community, right? That care for their kids, that care for their well-being. And that's what the coaching staff doesn't want. Why? Because they could interfere the training process. They could say, oh no, I'm going to take my kid away from you. And can you imagine Kamila Valieva as a gem, as a figure skating gem, or any other prodigy being taken away from Krystalny? No, they don't want that. They want to keep that prodigy, so to have a success. So that's why I think Kamila didn't know, because if the skater is taken away, if the parents don't know, the parents don't kind of had a chance to control the process. If parents don't know, the adult who is respected in Russia, I would say, more respected than a kid. So if a parent don't know, a child doesn't know in the first place. And the second reason I think that Kamila didn't know is because she was a teenager. And what teenagers do? They rebel. So I know very well, again, that Russian figure skating system is so harsh on their skaters. I know very well that some of them could be brainwashed. They train and believe that they are doing it for their country, that this is one of the most important things in the world, that only gold matters, stuff like that. And I believe that they kind of are being brainwashed, no matter how intelligent, no matter how smart they are. Because if somebody's telling you something since you were like 3 years old, of course you're gonna believe it. Of course, you don't have a choice. But I think that Kamila or any other kid, any other teenager didn't know because they could be rebellious about it. They could firstly tell their parents, and secondly, they could really say, no, the coaching staff didn't tell them because they fear that they could have been rebellious about it. And maybe the coaching staff just took into consideration that even if they brainwashed like 99% of the kids, there still could be 1%, like one kid, that would say no to them. And that's why they don't tell them, I think, because that could interrupt the process. It's just easier for adults who employ these methods not to tell the kid. So that's why I think they drugged her without letting her know. Moreover, I think that every word Kamila says is controlled by the adults. You know very well that they all have kind of a PR training because, figure skaters are perceived not only on the ice. I think that judges and audience, of course, they have an eye on them, how they carry themselves off the ice as well. And it all contributes to how they are perceived in general, not only as skaters, but also as people. And of course, it's important for coaching staffs to have these skates being perceived as decent human beings, as a people to like, to follow, because, it's a win-win, right? So I think that because of that, not only that they have a PR, that they really have to answer the questions from fans, from the audience, from journalists. Notice how neutral, how polite their answers always tend to be, except if you talk to Alexandra Trusova right after Women's Free in Beijing. That was not neutral by any means. But anyway, I think that if they are controlled, even in the terms of, training regime, what they eat, how much they weigh, what do they tell to journalists, I think they're also way more controlled in a cases more important, like doping accusations. So I think, like, for example, Kamila's explanation about grandpa glass or grandpa's dessert that probably had that trimetazine is a bullshit. We all know that. I mean, in some parallel universe, like, I could actually imagine that kind of situation, that maybe you have a loving grandpa who presents you with a dessert and secretly adds his heart medication to it because he cares for his granddaughter and he just thinks, okay, she's an athlete, I'm gonna give her this and that, she's not gonna be no about it. But I can imagine it. But it was so ridiculous because at that time, it looked like an explanation made in a state of panic. And also, this explanation fluctuated. First, it was a glass. Secondly, it was a dessert, stuff like that. So it was really unbelievable and nobody believed that. And secondly, Kamila also posted something in her Instagram stories, something like she's innocent and stuff like that, but she deleted it. And why? Because the more she shows herself as a victim, the more it portrays adults around her, meaning Eteri Tutberidze, Dr. Shivetsky, the same doctor that actually was a doctor for the Sochi team, where all the doping scandal came to light. So, portraying herself as a victim who unintentionally took the drug puts her coaching staff in not a very comfortable position in terms of PR and in general. So I think Kamila is 100%, and everything she says, everything she does is 100% controlled by the adults. The conclusion, she didn't know about the drug. My second take on this case, one of the most important, I think, because after the verdict, we all speak about the future. So, will Kamila Valieva continue her career? And that depends. This is something that I'm not so sure about, as for the fact that she didn't take the drug intentionally. According to the verdict, she can't train in a state-sponsored rings, meaning even in Russia, because please show me a ring in Russia that isn't a state-sponsored. There's no such thing. I mean, not a serious one, right? We are speaking about big sports here. I think she will continue her career on Russia because, I don't think they're going to respect the rule. They still have their domestic competition. They still call the Grand Prix, even though, the real Grand Prix is actually held somewhere in the world. And I think that her continuing her career will depend on will Russians want to send her to the next Olympics? And if so, she needs to train. I mean, can you imagine after all these years having an access to a luxury training facilities? Can you imagine letting her skate in some public rings like Donovan Carrillo used to do? I mean, it's impossible. So if they want to send her, they need to let her train and to let her train at the highest level. But I think they haven't decided yet on whether to send her to the Olympics or not. Of course, if they even be allowed to take part in the Olympics, because Russia is, of course, banned because of the war, not because of the doping itself. So I think they don't know yet, because first, it would put Kamila in a danger of being booed by the audience. And secondly, more important to them, of course, because they only see their own interest, they risk putting themselves in danger, in an uncomfortable position, being, pushed by the journalist asking, why did you even send her to the Olympics after all of that? Because guess what? The journalists, the fans, the judges, they will remember. We still remember Sochi and the doping scandal. We discuss it even today, comparing it to Valieva case. We remember it, even though it's almost 10 years have passed. And Russia's PR around Kamila surely doesn't help to forget about her, so to speak. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sell someone fresh and not known to Olympics, like, for example, a recently crowned Russian champion Adelia Petrosyan or Sofia Muravyova, for example. And secondly, Kamila, of course, could not have skills enough to even compete at the next Olympics game. We all know that given all the training regime in Tutberidze team being so harsh, probably she would be just exhausted and overused and just won't have enough strength to take part in it. And secondly, because figure skating is so rapidly changing. Today people do stuff that you wouldn't have imagined in the past, like for example, quadruple axel by Ilya Malinin. And with Kamila Valieva not having an access to a state-sponsored ring, with Kamila maybe being abandoned, maybe not ignored, but partially abandoned by her coaching staff because, she's not a fresh blood, right? We have Adelia Petrosyan, we have some other girls, Evgeny Plushenko's angels are slowly but consistently being better and better. So first the Russian stage, and then let's not forget European and Asian stages. Perhaps there are girls working as much as she used to. I think she just feels their breath on her neck. So let's not forget Europeans, let's not forget Asian, because everybody's talking, will Kamila Valieva be in a Russian team? But let's not forget the other skaters, right? Anyway, I think the Russians still discuss it and will make a decision only before the Olympics, based on girls' progress, their shape, because surely not taking into consideration a girl who would not be a serious contender for gold. They are gonna send a girl who is good for the PR and who'd be a contender for gold. And sadly, or maybe fortunately, it won't be Kamila, I think. And my third thought on this case is why some public statements, why some public declarations, including this one published by Evgenia Medvedeva on her Instagram, are actually harmful for Kamila, even if they look like a friendly, supportive post, like an innocent one. First and foremost, there's only one reason why, and I'm not going to be diving into it that much. I love Evgenia. I love her style. I love that she's brave, she's courageous. She actually spoke out about some abusive coaching methods in Tutberidze team. I love that she, when the war started, kind of said between the lines on her post on Instagram that she's against it. Like, she said something like she just wants to live in a world full of peace, that she's just a young woman, that she doesn't want to see awful stuff like that all over the media, which is kind of brave in Russia. Maybe not in our optics. We have the luxury to be more brave and to have our opinion expressed more openly. We have a freedom to do that. This is not the case in Russia, right? You can meet some severe consequences by saying that blatantly, that you don't support the government, right? So I liked her because of all of the things she did in the past, all of the things she said. But I'm not a big fan of her post. Why? Because, again, it focuses on Kamila, right? The more they speak about her in Russia, the more the focus is on her. While they should really shift their focus on adults instead. No matter whether it was Eteri Tutberidze, whether it was Dr. Shivetsky, maybe her parents by any chance, I don't really know. But, Russians really need to shift their focus on adults, and they don't do that. Why? Because Eteri Tutberidze is as much of a star as Kamila is. Not in terms of being an athlete, of course, not, shining in the interviews on TV, because she rarely gives any interviews. Although she spoke out about Kamila, again, speaking about Kamila. And even Tatyana Anatolievna Tarasova, the woman who I can't always agree with, so to speak. I mean, she's the woman who actively criticizes girls for their weight. She's just like crazy about it and set some unrealistic body expectations, beauty expectations in the sport, so conservative. But this is the only thing that I agree with her. This is the only reasonable voice in the discussion. She says, if I was Tutberidze, I would take some part of the blame on myself. I would explain something. And that's the first time I agree with Tarasova. It was the adults who actually ruined her career. Something that is going to always chase her. Something that probably she's going to be always remembered for. So that's why I think that public statements from Yevgenia, not to mention Tutberidze declaration, are harmful to her. And I really wish that we just have a closure. I don't know whether Russians will appear or not. I think that still there are more question marks in that case. So let's keep ourselves updated. Thank you so much for listening/watching. Have a great day and see you the next time.